Hey there, friends. It's Bill MacDonald, the reading, writing, and math doctor here. And I just want to say before we get started on this video on how to simplify the steps for students who struggle with reading uh, when they're taking a test that has a lot of content. Uh, Many of you are following me directly through Facebook, so you can just go to my ELAR group that you can see here, the ELAR and Write Prescription. Uh, we have both English and Spanish strategies and videos for you. And in the math, it's common sense. But I want you to notice that if you're in one of the online or in-person trainings for math, reading, and writing, you may be getting some emails from me at writing_doctor@yahoo.com. And sometimes you'll be receiving them through my alternate email there in the corner at bmacdonald124@gmail.com. So if you happen to be not getting emails from me, you might want to go into your settings or have somebody from your district and technology do it for you, where you can put me as a safe sender or add me to the safe sender list, because sometimes when things have attachments or there's links, or if your networks uh, are able to decipher that I'm sending to multiple teachers at the same time, multiple email addresses, sometimes it'll try to put it in junk mail or spam. Uh, if you're seeing this on Facebook and you are in the writing group, uh, go ahead and check your email inbox. Uh, and if you don't see this video in there, it means that you may be getting blocked. From what I can tell, there's only two of you so far that are getting blocked. Um, so double check and see if this video on simplified rules for reading and writing strategies for kids who struggle with reading. So here's the question that I get asked a lot. Mr. McDonald, do you think that students should be required to read the entire passage or passages for paired passages for reading, or should they be allowed to read the questions, focus on the question first, and then come back to the the passage, the poem, the play, the whatever the genre is, to be able to answer the questions? And the answer to that question is yes. Depending on the ability of your students, some of you feel like the students must, absolutely must read every stanza, scene, paragraph, section, and that's fine, but we have to differentiate our instruction and our instructions for kids who really struggle with reading and writing. And the same applies for those of you who are in my math group, Common Sense Math. The problems are becoming paragraphs now instead of just one or two sentences. And so if your kids do struggle with reading and writing, they're going to have a hard time with endurance making their way through the entire problem. So I'm going to show you a my new rules for reading and writing for 2023 and 2024, so that you can kind of tweak what I share to what you might be doing. And there's, like I've always said, for those of you who have been following me for a while, there's no one way to do anything and everything, and I don't think anybody should require that of you. I think you have to decide a combination of your teaching style and your students' learning style. What's going to be the best that will have the biggest impact on each individual student and his chances for growth or success. So let me share this year's version of my rules for reading and writing acronym. And a lot of you have your students, that's going to be my next activity. I'll show that in my next video. A lot of you have your students do a lot of these things. You just don't call it whatever you're about to see. Now, think of doing test questions as eating a meal. Um, the R, you're going to see the word rules spelled out here, and lots of things that start with each letter of rules that your kids can apply in their steps as they work their way through a question and each passage on a practice or the real test. So first of all, I want you to notice that for this year, I changed rules for reading, two rules for reading and writing, because on the backside, I have some editing and revising guides in my Mrs. PVC. Uh, I call her the process for elimination in the editing and revising emergency room. And that's in the little mini binder. But for the purposes of uh, doing it doing a joint reading and writing test, which is now the way it is. I kind of have these sheets back to back. So you might want to go ahead and have a student copy if you like this, or at least maybe have a copy of this on the board, or your students can just write down the keywords. You know, if you have kids who struggle, read is the important part. Understanding, labeling, either on multiple choice, eliminating and explaining the wrong answers, um, or on the extended response, uh, looking for evidence because whatever they write has to be based on evidence. Uh, Regardless of what the question is, you can do all of the restating and repeating you want, but if the answer, there's not an actual response, then it's going to hurt your students. And so the E would be um, evidence, examples, explain, explode, ending. Those are all E's that need to be done uh, in an essay. And then, of course, showing strategies or selecting. Now, so let me kind of take you through the analogy first. The R is sort of like the appetizer. You start off by reading something, and for your kids who struggle, that would be either reading the question first and then going to whatever sentence is being asked about in the reading or the writing portion of the test, or that section or sections, stanza or stanzas, scene or scenes, selection or selections, paragraphs, or the passage or the passages. Okay. But one of the things that I try to stress the importance of is that silence is deadly in a classroom of auditory learners. And so when you test as a class, when you're practicing things as a class, you can do the low of solo where everybody reads loudly, and that would be in class settings or group settings. Uh, or if you're working with a partner or testing by yourself, in on the actual test or on practice test, you could whisper softly. That way the students aren't just seeing the content, they're also hearing and hopefully listening and processing what they're hearing in their mind. And what will take place is that will create the you, which I'm going to call the meat of the meal. It will hopefully create an understanding of whatever is being asked. So when you think of it this way, for each k question, there's going to be certain k keywords that will help your students know uh, what to do, what to look for, or where to go. They'll be using k clues to find information that's being asked about in the question, or what is commonly known as the specific demands of the prompt. Okay. The L, and a lot of people tell me they don't, that we're kind of at a crossroads in terms of labeling. Uh, yes, it's an online test, but how much, if any, should I require of the students to write on paper? And so I want you to think of labeling when you have a can. The reason they put a label on the can is so that the people who are walking by that can in the store will know what's inside. And so if your students don't do any labeling uh, on paper with pencil or colored pencil or crayons, whatever you're allowing them to use, or blank paper by drawing some sort of graphic organizers or anchor charts, you won't be able to know what's going on inside their head. And so I want you to think of label as this, that not just the on the test itself, because we're so limited in terms of what we can do online, there has to be something on what I call the lined and blank paper. I call it the lab work. And so think of it like this, that for each question, I need at least some sort of little lined and blank paper lab work, like sort of like an x-ray to tell my teacher what's going on in my head. And so the EL can be the lab and blank E-log. That means as I'm processing information on the computer, I'm going to go to lined and or blank paper to log in certain things that my teacher has taught me in terms of uh, how to attack the question, the topic, and be able to search for related, relevant details or evidence from the selection. And as you see up here in the yellow, that labeling is what we're going to call the first vegetable. So it's sort of like a Luan platter from Luby's. If you're familiar with Luby's, I believe they're all around Texas at least. So again, the way to apply this to paper is uh, whatever you've been teaching your students, you need at least some minimum amount of lined and blank paper e-logging, uh, putting in something that the teacher has taught. And there's a very fine line between writing an entire novel, like rewriting the whole test, or at least writing little snippets, little notes. Basically, it's proving to the teacher that you are doing some work. And so you have to figure out with each student how much quantity can you expect from them so that they actually will have time to finish the test, but be able to uh, demonstrate to you that they do understand. And so when they don't understand, you'll be able to use the lined and blank paper e-log to see what went wrong in their thought process, as long as they have enough there to show you this is what I was thinking when I was working on this question. So the second vegetable is the E of rules. And again, it's on regular multiple choice for reading, editing, and revising. It's going to be beginning to eliminate and explain the wrong answer, the wrong multiple choice answers, uh, just with a word or a brief phrase. They would write the four letters, and then normally you're going to eliminate three, but sometimes if it says select two correct answers, or sometimes there's three correct answers in the non-multiple choice, then they have to decide um, which ones they're going to eliminate and briefly tell you in a word or a phrase why. When the E for uh, constructed responses and ex that are both SCR and um, extended responses is going to be uh, for the short constructed responses. All you need to do is find evidence, either an example or examples of evidence, and then according to the the short constructed rubric for evidence responses, all your students need to do is have one or more pieces of evidence and then be able to write that evidence in a complete sentence. And it can be paraphrased or it can be quoted with the exact words. So if you're going to do that, then I would suggest your students practice what I call the location and the quotation if they're going to use uh, the actual evidence, the direct quotes. So when you're moving from how to get to two land, the evidence that goes with the response, evidence response for a two, or extended responses for a three, then your students are going to have to explain each piece of evidence. They would explode because of the idea of using vivid word choices, uh, very precise word choices, and ways of responding to that piece of evidence and how it ties to the student's answer, called a central idea in elementary, a controlling idea in middle school, or the thesis in high school. And if you're doing a claim or opinion argumentative, I'm thinking that for you guys in secondary that have to do the correspondence, it's probably going to be most likely um, the student has to write a brief greeting, a salutation, and a closing uh, to whoever the topic assigns them to write to, and then follow the rules for opinion argumentative to state an opinion and make a claim or a counterclaim. As you can see, I have two little C's forwards and backwards there. Um, and then, of course, even though it's not there, the last thing that your students would do is once they're finished with the ending, the closing, because it does say that in order to get a three, 1, 2, 3, for the E, your students have to have an opening and a closing. So they have to have an introduction that will hopefully mention the topic and the idea, and a closing. And the ER this time is going to be uh, don't forget to edit and revise your paper before you turn it in. And so this is, yes, it looks kind of wordy to some of you, but this is the thought process that your students are going to have to go through when it comes to the different types of questions. And so the dessert, which many kids, they want to skip the entire meal and they don't want to do any reading understanding or labeling or eliminating or executing. So if you can see um, an E that I don't have on here that you might be telling your kids is execute your strategies. And so if you're writing on lined and blank paper, cute means adorable, lovely. And so tell your kids, I want you to execute your strategies, not ugly them. I know it's kind of corny, but it'll hopefully help your kids when it comes to writing neatly, because you want to be able to understand what they were writing and thinking as they worked their way through the problem. So I remember when I was teaching, and I've done it in several of my consulting trainings with students, is I'll buy those little cuties from Walmart, or in our part of Texas, we have HEB, and cuties are those little seedless, tiny mandarin oranges. And so if the students are executing, then they can get a cutie, and it's just a healthy little snack as a reward for those kids who are trying to write neatly as they go. So finally, we're on the dessert, which many kids don't want to do. So if you have your students go through all the steps, then you might have some sort of reward for the kids who make it through the steps and don't skip any of them. And so you can have a certain number of candies, like you can possibly have a little package of Skittles, let's say, as you're going through a question. And for each step they do for a question, they can earn one Skittle. They sell them in those little individual packs. And you can also do the same thing with Smarties. They come in packs of like 20. And so just to kind of check as they're going through a question, you can allow them to get a Skittle or a Smartie for each section of your strategies that you ask them to do. So you want them to show strategies on paper, but you also want them to do highlighting, uh, labeling inside the computer, and they'll select the correct answer or answers and show you why it or they, because we did talk about more than one answer being correct sometimes, and then they'll submit their online response. So that basically is, in a nutshell, the rules, the steps. So I suggest for those of you that don't have something, that you apply that. For you that are Spanish teachers, I have an acronym that spells LIES, LIES, and basically it's leer, etiquetar, investigar, uh, idea. Basically, everything that's here is in Spanish instead of in English, but it's just using the word lies. So uh, it's just like your students can write the word rules next to uh, uh, let's say question number one, and do a check once they read, a check once they show or understand what's being asked, another check if they're labeling. And so since we're supposed to be doing these things on the computer and on paper, then you can have two check marks. I read the question, and I did something on paper. I wrote number one on paper. I understood it. Check. I understood where it's at in the text, the location, etc. So when you see me on the next video referring to the acronym rules, that's what I'll be using as a guide. And again, if you already have something that works, that's great. You don't need to adopt or adapt to mine. It's just that some students have no sense of structure or organization, and they need a very simple or perhaps a step-by-step guide in terms of what's expected of them when they're making their way through a test. So thanks for watching the video. Uh, please take the time to share or tag one of your reading and or writing teacher friends. Feel free to message me if you have a question. If you would like the PDF of this file that I showed you that has the rules for reading and writing on one side and the Mrs. PVC process of elimination for editing and revising on the other side, feel free to email me at the email address that you see there to behind my shoulder there, the writing_doctor@yahoo.com or bmacdonald124@gmail.com. Take care, guys. God bless and have a wonderful rest of your day.